My name is Isabella Rossi, and for 62 years, the rolling hills of Tuscany have been my constant companion. My life has been interwoven with the vineyards, the olive groves, and the warm, golden sunlight that bathes everything in its glow. This land, this ancient farmhouse, is more than just property. It's my heart, my history, the legacy of generations. I've always found solace in the simple rhythms of rural life, the satisfaction of nurturing the land, and the deep connection to my heritage. I live a comfortable life, surrounded by the beauty I've cultivated. My days are filled with tending my garden, experimenting with new recipes using fresh, local ingredients, and enjoying the company of my lifelong friends from the village. I never married. My passion was always the land, and now, well into my golden years, I am content with my choices. My son, Marco, is the only family I have left, and he lives with his wife, Sophia, in a modern apartment in Florence. They visit when they can, but the city keeps them busy. I understood that, or at least I thought I did. Life, though, has a funny way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it? It all started subtly with little comments, innocent questions that, in retrospect, were anything but. Sophia, my son's wife, a woman who always seemed a bit too polished, a bit too ambitious for our simple life, began to take an unusual interest in the farmhouse. She started asking about the estate, the value of the land, the potential for development. At first, I brushed it off as polite curiosity, the kind of small talk one makes during family visits. But her questions became more persistent, more pointed. She would linger in the living room, studying the antique furniture, running her fingers over the faded tapestries, whispering about their potential value. She suggested I should consider selling the farmhouse and moving into a smaller, more manageable apartment in Florence. "It would be so much easier for you, Isabella," she would say, her voice dripping with false concern. "No more backaches from gardening, no more worrying about the upkeep of this old place. You could be closer to us, to Marco." I always politely declined. This house held too many memories, too much of my soul. It was where I belonged, but Sophia wouldn't let it go. She started bringing articles about retirement homes, about the benefits of assisted living. She even arranged for a real estate agent to visit the farmhouse without even asking me. That's when I knew something was truly amiss. My sweet, unassuming son seemed oblivious to his wife's machinations. He was always so eager to please her, so easily swayed by her opinions. He would nod along with her suggestions, repeating her words as if they were his own. I tried to talk to him, to express my concerns, but he would simply dismiss them as old-fashioned worries. "Sophia just wants what's best for you, Mama," he would say, his eyes glazed over with adoration. "She's just being practical." I felt a growing sense of unease, a prickling sensation that something was terribly wrong. Was it possible that Sophia was trying to push me out of my own home? Was she after the inheritance? Thought was horrifying, but the more I observed her behavior, the more convinced I became that my suspicions were justified. The final straw came during a family dinner. Sophia, after several glasses of wine, became unusually bold. "Isabella," she said, her voice laced with a saccharine sweetness that made my skin crawl, "have you thought any more about your will? It's important to have these things in order, especially at your age." Marco choked on his wine, clearly embarrassed by his wife's bluntness. But Sophia just smiled, unfazed. "We just want to make sure everything is taken care of," she continued, her eyes gleaming with a strange intensity. "We wouldn't want any complications, would we?" That night, I lay awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let Sophia manipulate me or, worse, force me out of my home. But what could I do? I was just an old woman, alone in the countryside. She was young, ambitious, and clearly willing to do whatever it took to get what she wanted. I felt a surge of anger, a fierce determination to protect what was mine. I may be old, I thought, but I'm not stupid. And I'm not going down without a fight. What scheme was she really cooking up? I decided to confide in my oldest friend, Maria, who had always been like a sister to me. Over a pot of strong espresso, I laid out my fears and suspicions, watching as Maria's usually cheerful face hardened with anger. "That viper!" she exclaimed, her eyes flashing. "I always knew there was something off about that woman. Don't you worry, Isabella. We'll figure out a way to stop her." Maria, despite her age, was as sharp as a tack and as resourceful as anyone I knew. She was also deeply connected to the community, with a network of friends and acquaintances that stretched throughout the region. Together, we hatched a plan. It was risky, audacious, and possibly a little crazy, but it was the only way I could see to protect myself and my home. Our first step was to gather information. Maria used her connections to discreetly investigate Sophia's background, her financial situation, and her past relationships. What we discovered was unsettling, to say the least. Sophia had a history of debt, a penchant for luxury, and a string of failed business ventures. She was also known for her manipulative charm and her ability to exploit the weaknesses of others. It became clear that she saw me and my farmhouse as her ticket to financial security. Armed with this knowledge, we moved to the next phase of our plan, to make Sophia believe that the farmhouse was more trouble than it was worth. We started by spreading rumors about the estate, exaggerating the costs of maintenance, the difficulties of farming, and the potential for environmental problems. Maria's network of gossipy friends proved invaluable in this regard. Soon, the whispers were circulating throughout the village, reaching Sophia's ears through various channels. We also staged a series of minor accidents around the farmhouse: a leaky roof, a broken water pipe, a swarm of bees in the attic. Each incident was carefully orchestrated to appear as a natural occurrence, but they all contributed to the impression that the property was falling into disrepair. I even started neglecting the garden, letting the weeds grow and the flowers wilt, creating a visual representation of decline. Sophia, of course, noticed everything. She would complain about the state of the house, the mess in the garden, the constant repairs. "Isabella, this place is a money pit," she would exclaim, her voice filled with frustration. "You're throwing your money away trying to keep it up." I would simply shrug and sigh, pretending to be overwhelmed by the burden of ownership. "I know, dear," I would say, my voice trembling with feigned exhaustion. "It's just too much for me to handle anymore. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should just sell it and move into an apartment." Sophia's eyes would light up at this suggestion, but she would try to conceal her excitement. "Oh, Isabella, don't say that," she would reply, her voice dripping with insincerity. "We just want what's best for you." But I could see the wheels turning in her head, the calculations being made. She was starting to believe that the farmhouse was more of a liability than an asset, and that was exactly what we wanted. But would our plan work? Would Sophia be deterred by the apparent problems with the estate, or would she simply see them as obstacles to be overcome on her path to inheritance? I couldn't be sure, but I knew we had to keep pushing, keep playing our parts, until we reached the final act of our little drama. And what would happen if Marco discovered our deception? The next step in our plan was to create a rival suitor for the farmhouse, someone who would appear to be genuinely interested in purchasing the property, but who would ultimately back out at the last minute, leaving Sophia even more frustrated and disillusioned. Maria introduced me to a charming elderly gentleman named Giovanni, a retired architect with a passion for historical buildings. Giovanni was more than happy to play along with our scheme. He visited the farmhouse several times, admiring the architecture, praising the location, and making vague promises about restoring the property to its former glory. He even brought me flowers and a bottle of my favorite wine, further cementing the impression that he was a serious buyer. Sophia, of course, was furious. She saw Giovanni as a threat to her plans, an obstacle standing between her and the inheritance she so desperately craved. She would glare at him during his visits, making snide remarks about his age and his unrealistic ideas. She even tried to sabotage his efforts, pointing out the flaws in the house, exaggerating the costs of renovation, and spreading rumors about his financial instability. But Giovanni was a seasoned player. He brushed off her comments with a smile, charmed her with his wit, and continued to woo me with his attentions. He even offered me a generous sum for the farmhouse, a sum that was significantly higher than its actual market value. Sophia's eyes widened when she heard the offer. She knew that if I accepted, she would be cut out of the deal, left with nothing but resentment and disappointment. She tried to convince me to reject Giovanni's offer, arguing that he was trying to take advantage of me, that he was not a trustworthy buyer. But I pretended to be swayed by his charm and his promises, telling her that I was seriously considering his offer. "He seems like such a nice man, Sophia," I would say, my voice dripping with innocence. "And he's offering me so much money. I could finally retire in comfort without having to worry about anything." Sophia's frustration reached a boiling point. She became increasingly desperate, trying to manipulate me, to guilt-trip me, to pressure me into rejecting Giovanni's offer. She even started arguing with Marco, accusing him of not doing enough to protect her interests. Their marriage, which had always seemed so perfect on the surface, began to show cracks under the strain of our little game. I watched with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness as Sophia's carefully constructed world began to crumble around her. But I knew that we couldn't let up, not yet. We had to keep pushing until she reached her breaking point, until she finally revealed her true colors. But how far was too far? Was I risking damaging my relationship with my son beyond repair? The climax of our plan arrived during a weekend visit. Sophia, visibly stressed and on edge, cornered me in the kitchen while Marco was outside tending to the garden. "Isabella," she began, her voice trembling with barely suppressed anger, "I need to talk to you about Giovanni." I pretended to be surprised by her intensity. "What about him, dear?" I asked, stirring a pot of simmering tomato sauce. "He's trying to cheat you," she exclaimed, her eyes flashing. "He's not really interested in the farmhouse. He's just trying to drive up the price so he can sell it to someone else for a profit." I raised an eyebrow, feigning ignorance. "Are you sure about that, Sophia?" I asked, my voice carefully controlled. "Of course I'm sure," she snapped. "I've done my research. He's a known con artist. He's done this before." I paused for a moment, pretending to consider her words. "Well, I don't know," I said finally. "He seems like such a nice man, and he's offered me so much money." Sophia's face contorted with rage. "Don't you see, Isabella?" she hissed. "He's trying to take advantage of you. He thinks you're just a stupid old woman who doesn't know any better." I gasped, pretending to be shocked by her words. "Sophia," I exclaimed, my voice trembling with indignation. "How dare you speak to me like that?" She didn't back down. "It's true," she screamed. "You're being naive. You're letting him manipulate you. And you're ruining everything for me." I stared at her, my eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, ruining everything for you?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. She hesitated for a moment, realizing that she had said too much, but it was too late. The truth was out. I just meant that. I want what's best for you," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I laughed, a cold, bitter sound that echoed through the kitchen. "Don't lie to me, Sophia," I said, my voice dripping with scorn. "I know what you're after. You want the farmhouse. You want the inheritance. You've been trying to get rid of me since the day you married my son." Tears streamed down her face, but I felt no sympathy for her. "It's not like that, Isabella," she sobbed. I have so much debt. I need the money. I thought if I could just get you to sell the farmhouse, I could finally be free." I shook my head, disgusted by her selfishness. "You're a disgrace, Sophia," I said, my voice filled with contempt. "You're willing to destroy your own family for money. You don't deserve to be a part of this family." At that moment, Marco walked into the kitchen, his face etched with confusion. "What's going on here?" he asked, his eyes darting between Sophia and me. Sophia burst into tears and ran out of the room, leaving Marco standing there, bewildered and heartbroken. How would Marco react when he learned the truth about his wife? I took a deep breath and turned to face my son. "Marco," I said, my voice trembling with emotion, "we need to talk." I told him everything. Sophia's manipulative behavior, her attempts to push me out of my home, her obsession with the inheritance. I spared no details, laying bare the truth in all its ugly reality. Marco listened in stunned silence, his face growing paler with each passing word. When I finished, he stood there for a long moment, his eyes filled with disbelief and pain. I can't believe it," he stammered, his voice barely audible. "Sophia would never do something like that." I sighed, knowing that it would be difficult for him to accept the truth. He had always been so blinded by his love for Sophia, so eager to see the best in her. "I know it's hard to believe, Marco," I said gently, "but it's true. I have proof. Maria and I have been investigating her for months." I showed him the documents we had gathered. Sophia's debt records, her failed business ventures, the testimonies from people who had been manipulated by her in the past. As he read through the evidence, his face hardened with anger and disgust. "I can't believe I was so blind," he said, his voice filled with self-reproach. "How could I have been so stupid?" I put my hand on his shoulder, trying to comfort him. "Don't blame yourself, Marco," I said. "Sophia is very good at manipulating people. She knows how to play on their emotions, how to exploit their weaknesses." He shook his head, still reeling from the shock of the revelation. "What am I going to do?" he asked, his voice filled with despair. "I can't stay married to her, not after what she's done." I nodded, knowing that he had made the right decision. "You deserve better, Marco," I said. "You deserve someone who loves you for who you are, not for what you have." That night, Marco confronted Sophia. I don't know exactly what was said, but I heard shouting and crying coming from their bedroom. The next morning, Sophia was gone. Marco told me that she had packed her bags and left without even saying goodbye. He seemed devastated, but also relieved. He knew that he had made the right decision, even though it was a painful one. As for me, I felt a sense of triumph and vindication. I had protected my home, my legacy, from a greedy and manipulative woman. But I also felt a deep sadness for my son, who had been betrayed by the person he loved most. But the story doesn't end there. There's one more twist, one more surprise that I never saw coming. What would become of my relationship with Marco now? A few weeks after Sophia left, Marco came to visit me at the farmhouse. He looked tired and drawn, but there was a newfound strength in his eyes. "Mama," he said, his voice filled with sincerity, "I want to thank you for everything you've done. For opening my eyes to the truth, for protecting me from Sophia, for always being there for me." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my heart. "You don't have to thank me, Marco," I said. "I did what any mother would do, I just wanted to protect you." He shook his head. "No, it's more than that," he said. "You've shown me what's truly important in life. You've taught me the value of family, of tradition, of staying true to yourself." He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately," he continued. "About my life, about my future, and I've realized that I'm not happy in Florence. I miss the countryside, I miss the simple life, I miss being close to you." My heart skipped a beat. "What are you saying, Marco?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that I hadn't seen in years. "I'm saying that I want to come home, Mama," he said. "I want to move back to the farmhouse. I want to help you with the vineyard, with the olive groves, with everything." Tears streamed down my face as I embraced my son. "Oh, Marco," I sobbed, "that's the best news I've ever heard." And so my life took an unexpected turn. Instead of being alone in my old age, I found myself surrounded by family once again. Marco moved back into the farmhouse, bringing with him a renewed sense of purpose and a deep appreciation for the land. Together, we worked to restore the vineyard to its former glory, to cultivate the olive groves, to preserve the traditions that had been passed down through generations. We spent our days working side by side, sharing stories, laughing, and simply enjoying each other's company. And in the evenings, we would sit on the porch, watching the sunset over the Tuscan hills, feeling grateful for the simple blessings of life. Sophia's betrayal, which had initially seemed like a tragedy, had ultimately brought us closer together. It had reminded us of what was truly important: family, love, and the enduring power of the human spirit. And as I looked at my son, standing beside me, his face filled with contentment, I knew that I had finally found my happy ending. The rolling hills of Tuscany had witnessed my life's trials and tribulations, and they would continue to witness the blossoming of a new chapter filled with love, family, and a legacy that would endure for generations to come. But was this truly the end of the story? Was Sophia really gone for good, or would she return to wreak havoc on our lives once again? Only time would tell. For now, I was content, surrounded by the beauty of my homeland and the love of my son, a bond strengthened by adversity. Life, after all, has a way of surprising you, doesn't it? Just when you think you've weathered the storm, a new gust of wind can appear on the horizon. But I was ready. I had learned my lesson. I would never again underestimate the power of family, the importance of protecting what's mine, and the enduring strength of an old woman who refuses to be defeated. And as I sat there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I couldn't help but smile. I was Isabella Rossi, and this was my home, and I would defend it with every breath in my body until the very end. But the tranquility was short-lived. Just as the rhythm of our lives settled into a comfortable harmony, a letter arrived, postmarked from Milan. It was addressed to Marco, but the return address was unfamiliar. I watched him open it, his brow furrowing as he scanned the contents. The color drained from his face, and he sank heavily into a chair, the letter trembling in his hand. "What is it, Marco?" I asked, my voice laced with concern. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "It's from Sophia," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "She's suing me for half of everything." My blood ran cold. "What?" I exclaimed. "That's impossible. She has no right." He handed me the letter, and I read it with growing indignation. Sophia was claiming that she had contributed significantly to the success of the vineyard and the olive groves during her marriage to Marco. She argued that she had worked tirelessly to improve the business, to market our products, and to expand our reach. She even claimed that she had been the driving force behind the renovations of the farmhouse, conveniently forgetting that she had only pushed for them to increase its value for a potential sale. And now, she wanted her share. Half of the farmhouse, half of the vineyard, half of everything we had worked so hard to build. It was outrageous, a blatant attempt to exploit Marco's generosity and my vulnerability. "That viper!" I exclaimed, my voice trembling with rage. "She's not going to get away with this." Marco looked defeated. "I don't know what to do, Mama," he said. "I don't have the money to fight her in court, and even if I did, I don't know if I could win. She's a skilled manipulator, and she'll twist the truth to suit her needs." I refused to give up. "We're not going to let her bully us, Marco," I said, my voice filled with determination. "We'll fight her. We'll show her that she can't mess with the Rossi family." I knew it wouldn't be easy. Sophia had the resources to hire a team of high-powered lawyers while we were just a simple farming family with limited means. But we had something that she didn't, the truth, and we had each other. I called Maria, and together, we hatched a plan to defend ourselves against Sophia's lawsuit. We knew we needed to find evidence to disprove her claims, to show that she had not contributed to the success of the vineyard and the olive groves, and that she had, in fact, been a hindrance rather than a help. We started by gathering records of our expenses, our sales, and our profits. We documented every transaction, every improvement, every effort that had been made to build up the business over the years. We also interviewed our friends and neighbors, asking them to testify to the fact that Sophia had never been involved in the day-to-day operations of the farm. They were more than happy to help, eager to stand up against Sophia's greed and dishonesty. But we knew that evidence alone wouldn't be enough. We needed to find something that would truly discredit her, something that would expose her true character and motives. Maria, with her extensive network of contacts, began digging into Sophia's past, searching for any dirt that we could use against her. And what she found was shocking. Sophia had a long history of financial scams and fraudulent activities. She had borrowed money from friends and family, promising to repay them with interest, but had never followed through. She had invested in get-rich-quick schemes that had turned out to be Ponzi schemes, leaving her investors empty-handed. She had even been accused of embezzling funds from her previous employer, although the case had been dropped due to lack of evidence. This was the ammunition we needed. We presented our findings to Marco's lawyer, a sharp and experienced woman named Alessandra, who was confident that we could win the case. She advised us to file a countersuit against Sophia, accusing her of defamation and fraud. This would put her on the defensive and force her to reveal her true motives. The legal battle was long and arduous. Sophia's lawyers were relentless, trying to intimidate us, to discredit our witnesses, and to twist the truth to their advantage. But we stood our ground, refusing to be bullied or intimidated. We presented our evidence with clarity and conviction, exposing Sophia's lies and deceit. And finally, after months of legal wrangling, the judge ruled in our favor. Sophia's lawsuit was dismissed, and she was ordered to pay our legal fees. We had won, but the victory felt hollow. The legal battle had taken a toll on Marco, dredging up painful memories and forcing him to confront the reality of Sophia's betrayal. He became withdrawn and despondent, losing interest in the vineyard and the olive groves. I feared that he would never fully recover from the experience. But then, one evening, as we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, he turned to me and said, "Mama, I need to get away from here. I need to clear my head to find myself again." I understood. He needed to escape the shadow of Sophia's betrayal to rediscover his passion for life. "Where do you want to go, Marco?" I asked. He thought for a moment, then said, "I've always wanted to visit America, to see the national parks, to hike the mountains, to experience a different culture." It was a wonderful idea. A change of scenery, a new adventure could be just what he needed to heal and to move on. I encouraged him to go, offering to take care of the farm while he was away. He booked a flight for the following week, and I helped him pack his bags. As he stood at the door ready to leave, he turned to me and said, "I don't know how long I'll be gone, Mama, but I promise I'll come back. I'll always come back to you." I smiled, tears welling up in my eyes. "I know you will, Marco," I said, "and I'll be here waiting for you." I watched him drive away, feeling a mixture of hope and trepidation. Would he find what he was looking for in America? Would he ever truly be happy again? And what would happen to me while he was gone? I was alone once more, facing an uncertain future, but I refused to succumb to despair. I had survived worse challenges in the past, and I would survive this one too. But as I stood on the porch, watching his car disappear down the road, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was coming, something that would test my strength and my resilience even further. What unforeseen challenge awaited me on the horizon? Life settled into a quiet rhythm after Marco's departure. The days were filled with the familiar tasks of tending the vineyard and the olive groves, the evenings spent in the comforting solitude of the farmhouse. I missed Marco terribly, but I found solace in the knowledge that he was pursuing his own path, searching for his own happiness. We spoke on the phone regularly, and he shared his adventures with me, describing the breathtaking landscapes he had seen, the fascinating people he had met, and the sense of freedom he had discovered. He sounded happier than he had in years, and that gave me peace of mind. But even as I rejoiced in his newfound joy, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. There was a subtle undercurrent of unease in my life, a sense that I was being watched, that I was no longer alone. I would often find myself glancing over my shoulder, scanning the surrounding fields for any sign of movement. I would hear strange noises at night, rustling in the bushes, footsteps on the gravel path. I tried to dismiss it as my imagination, as the paranoia of an old woman living alone in the countryside. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. One morning, as I was tending the garden, I noticed that the gate to the property was open. I distinctly remembered closing it the night before, and I couldn't imagine how it could have opened on its own. I walked over to the gate and examined the latch. It was broken, as if someone had forced it open. My heart began to race. Someone had been on my property, someone who didn't want me to know they were there. I immediately called Maria, and she came over to the farmhouse with her son, Giovanni, who was a retired police officer. Giovanni inspected the gate and the surrounding area, searching for any clues that might indicate who had been there and what they were after. He found a set of footprints leading away from the gate, but they were too faint to identify the person who had made them. He also found a small, metallic object lying near the gate, a piece of what appeared to be a broken surveillance device. He examined it closely, then looked at me with a grave expression. "Isabella," he said, "I think someone is spying on you. This looks like a piece of a hidden camera or a listening device." My blood ran cold. Someone was spying on me. Who would do such a thing, and why? I immediately suspected Sophia. Could she be behind this? Was she still trying to find a way to get her hands on my property? It seemed unlikely, but I couldn't rule it out. She was capable of anything. Giovanni advised me to install a security system to protect myself from any potential threats. I agreed, and he arranged for a local company to come to the farmhouse and install cameras and alarms. I also started carrying a small, personal alarm with me at all times, in case of an emergency. But even with these precautions, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I knew that whoever was spying on me was still out there, watching my every move, waiting for an opportunity to strike. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't just sit around and wait to be attacked. I needed to find out who was behind this, and I needed to stop them before they could do any harm. I enlisted Maria's help, and together, we began our own investigation. We started by asking around the village, trying to gather information about any suspicious activity. We spoke to our neighbors, to the local shopkeepers, to anyone who might have seen or heard something unusual. We also started monitoring the area around the farmhouse, keeping a close eye out for any unfamiliar faces or vehicles. Our investigation was slow and painstaking, but we were determined to uncover the truth. And then, one evening, as we were reviewing our notes, Maria suddenly gasped. "Isabella," she said, "I think I know who's behind this." She pointed to a name on our list of suspects, a name that I recognized immediately. It was Carlo Visconti, a wealthy businessman from Milan. Carlo Visconti was a notorious land developer, known for his ruthless tactics and his willingness to do anything to get his hands on valuable property. He had been trying to buy my farmhouse for years, but I had always refused to sell. Could he be the one who was spying on me? Was he trying to intimidate me into selling him my land? It seemed like a plausible explanation. I knew that Carlo Visconti was a powerful and dangerous man, and I knew that I had to be careful. But I also knew that I couldn't back down. I had to protect my home, my legacy, from this ruthless predator. But how could I possibly compete with someone as powerful and influential as Carlo Visconti? The challenge seemed insurmountable, but I refused to be intimidated. I would fight back, with every ounce of strength and cunning I possessed. But how could I possibly gather enough evidence to prove that he was behind the spying? And even if I could, would the authorities be willing to take on someone as wealthy and well-connected as Carlo Visconti? I decided to confront Carlo Visconti directly. It was a risky move, but I felt that it was the only way to get to the truth. I called his office in Milan and requested a meeting. To my surprise, he agreed to see me the following day. I drove to Milan early in the morning, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. As I approached his office building, a towering skyscraper in the heart of the city, I couldn't help but feel intimidated. Carlo Visconti was a powerful man, and I was just an old woman from the countryside. But I refused to let my fear overwhelm me. I had come too far to back down now. I entered the building and was escorted to Visconti's office, a lavishly decorated room with panoramic views of the city. Carlo Visconti was sitting behind a large desk, his face stern and unsmiling. He was a tall, imposing man with a sharp gaze that seemed to pierce right through me. "Isabella Rossi," he said, his voice cold and formal. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" I took a deep breath and met his gaze. "I know that you're spying on me, Carlo Visconti," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I know that you're trying to intimidate me into selling you my farmhouse." He raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "I have no idea what you're talking about," he said. "I have no interest in your property." I scoffed. "Don't lie to me," I said. "I have proof. I know that you're behind the surveillance, and I know that you're trying to force me out of my home." He leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. "You have no proof of anything," he said, "and if you continue to make these accusations, I will be forced to take legal action against you." I stood my ground. "I'm not afraid of you, Carlo Visconti," I said. "I'm not going to let you bully me. I'm going to fight you with every resource I have." He laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "You're an old woman, Isabella Rossi," he said. "You can't possibly hope to defeat me. I have more money, more power, more influence than you can imagine." I smiled, a small, defiant smile. "Maybe so," I said, "but I have something that you don't. I have the truth, and I have the support of my community. We're not going to let you steal our land, our heritage, our way of life." He glared at me, his eyes filled with rage. "You're making a mistake, Isabella Rossi," he said. "You're going to regret this." I turned and walked out of his office, leaving him seething with anger. I knew that I had made an enemy, a powerful and dangerous enemy, but I also knew that I had done the right thing. I had stood up to him, and I had shown him that I wouldn't be intimidated. As I drove back to the countryside, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. I knew that Carlo Visconti wouldn't give up easily. He would come after me, and he would use every weapon at his disposal, but I was ready. I would defend my home, my family, my legacy with every ounce of strength I possessed. When I got home, Maria was waiting for me, her face filled with concern. "What happened, Isabella?" she asked. "Did you talk to him?" I told her everything that had happened, and she listened with growing anger and indignation. "That monster!" she exclaimed. "He's not going to get away with this." We decided to intensify our investigation, to gather as much evidence as possible against Carlo Visconti. We knew that we needed to find something that would not only prove that he was behind the spying, but also expose his other illegal activities. Maria reached out to her contacts in Milan, seeking information about Visconti's business dealings. She discovered that he was involved in a number of shady real estate transactions, that he was using his wealth and influence to manipulate zoning laws and to exploit loopholes in the regulations. She also learned that he had a history of bribing public officials and of intimidating his rivals. This was exactly what we needed. With this information in hand, we contacted a journalist from a major Italian newspaper, a woman known for her integrity and her willingness to take on powerful figures. We shared our findings with her, providing her with the evidence we had gathered. She was intrigued by the story and promised to investigate further. A few days later, the newspaper published a front-page article exposing Carlo Visconti's illegal activities. The article detailed his shady real estate deals, his bribery of public officials, and his intimidation of his rivals. It also mentioned his attempt to force me to sell him my farmhouse. The article caused a sensation. The public was outraged by Visconti's behavior, and the authorities launched an investigation into his business dealings. Visconti's reputation was ruined, his career was in tatters, and his empire was crumbling around him. He was facing criminal charges, and he knew that he would likely spend the rest of his life in prison. I had won. I had defeated Carlo Visconti, and I had protected my home, my family, my legacy. But the victory came at a price. Visconti's downfall had created a power vacuum in the Milanese business world, and other ambitious figures were eager to fill it. I knew that I couldn't let my guard down, that I had to remain vigilant to protect myself from any potential threats. But as I sat on the porch of my farmhouse, watching the sunset over the Tuscan hills, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace and contentment. I had faced my fears, I had stood up to my enemies, and I had emerged victorious. I was Isabella Rossi, and this was my home. And I would defend it with every breath in my body until the very end. But what if Visconti, in his desperation, decided to take revenge on me, to strike back in a way that I couldn't possibly anticipate? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. The weeks that followed were filled with a sense of uneasy calm. The authorities were investigating Carlo Visconti's activities, and he was lying low, trying to avoid further scrutiny. I continued to tend to the vineyard and the olive groves, finding solace in the familiar rhythms of rural life. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Visconti was still out there, plotting his revenge. I increased my security measures, installing more cameras and alarms, and I made sure to never leave the farmhouse alone. Maria visited me every day, and we spent hours discussing our options, trying to anticipate Visconti's next move. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch, drinking our tea, we noticed a car approaching the farmhouse. It was a black sedan with tinted windows, and it was driving very slowly, as if the occupants were surveying the property. My heart began to race. Could it be Visconti? Was he finally making his move? The car stopped in front of the gate and a man got out. He was tall and muscular with a shaved head and a menacing expression. He walked towards the gate and stared at us, his eyes cold and emotionless. "Isabella Rossi?" he asked, his voice gruff and intimidating. I nodded, my voice trembling slightly. "Who are you?" I asked. "I have a message for you," he said. "Carlo Visconti sends his regards. He wants you to know that this isn't over. He's going to make you pay for what you've done to him." He turned and walked back to the car, and the driver sped away. I was terrified. Visconti was threatening me, sending a clear message that he wasn't going to give up. I knew that I had to take this threat seriously, that I had to protect myself and my home from his wrath. I immediately called the police, and they sent a patrol car to the farmhouse. The officers took a statement from me and promised to increase their patrols in the area. But I knew that it wouldn't be enough. Visconti was a powerful and resourceful man, and he could easily circumvent the police protection. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't rely on the authorities to protect me. I had to find a way to defend myself, to show Visconti that I wouldn't be intimidated. I contacted an old friend of mine, a retired military officer named Lorenzo. Lorenzo was a skilled strategist and a trained marksman, and he had a network of contacts in the security industry. I asked him to help me protect my farmhouse from Visconti's threats. Lorenzo agreed to help, and he immediately began to assess the situation. He inspected the property, identified the vulnerabilities, and developed a comprehensive security plan. He installed motion sensors, infrared cameras, and a state-of-the-art alarm system. He also trained me in self-defense techniques and taught me how to use a firearm. I was hesitant at first, but I knew that I had to be prepared to defend myself if necessary. Lorenz also hired a team of security guards to patrol the property around the clock. The guards were armed and highly trained, and they were instructed to shoot anyone who trespassed on the property without authorization. With these security measures in place, I felt a little more secure. But I knew that the threat from Visconti was still very real. He was a desperate man, and he was capable of anything. One night, as I was sleeping in my bed, I was awakened by a loud noise. It sounded like an explosion coming from the direction of the vineyard. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window. I saw that the vineyard was on fire. Flames were leaping into the air, consuming the grapevines. I was horrified. Visconti was trying to destroy my livelihood, to ruin me financially. I called the fire department, and they arrived quickly and began to extinguish the flames. But the damage was already done. A significant portion of the vineyard had been destroyed, and it would take years to recover. I was devastated. The vineyard was more than just a business to me. It was a symbol of my family's legacy, a testament to our hard work and dedication. And now, Visconti had tried to take it all away from me. I was filled with rage, a burning desire for revenge. I wouldn't let Visconti get away with this. I would make him pay for what he had done. But how could I possibly retaliate against someone as powerful and ruthless as Carlo Visconti? I needed a plan, a strategy that would allow me to strike back at him, to make him suffer as I had suffered. And I needed to do it in a way that would protect me and my family from any further harm. As I stood there, watching the flames consume my vineyard, I knew that I had reached a turning point. I could either succumb to despair, allowing Visconti to destroy my life, or I could rise up and fight back, with every ounce of strength and cunning I possessed. And I knew, in that moment, that I would choose the latter. But how far was I willing to go to get my revenge? Was I willing to cross the line, to become the very thing that I despised? I decided to use Carlo Visconti's own tactics against him. I would infiltrate his organization, gather evidence of his illegal activities, and then expose him to the authorities. It was a risky plan, but I felt that it was the only way to bring him to justice. I contacted Lorenzo and asked him to help me find someone who could infiltrate Visconti's organization. Lorenzo knew a former intelligence operative named Marco Bellini. Marco was a master of disguise and deception, and he had a proven track record of infiltrating criminal organizations. Lorenzo introduced me to Marco, and I explained my plan to him. He was hesitant at first, but I convinced him that it was the right thing to do. He agreed to help, and he began to prepare for his mission. Marco spent weeks studying Visconti's organization, learning about his employees, his business partners, and his security protocols. He also developed a cover identity, a persona that would allow him to gain access to Visconti's inner circle. Once he was ready, Marco traveled to Milan and began to execute his plan. He approached one of Visconti's employees, a disgruntled accountant who was known to be unhappy with his job. Marco befriended the accountant and gained his trust. He learned that Visconti was involved in a number of illegal activities, including money laundering, tax evasion, and arms trafficking. He also learned that Visconti was planning to expand his operations into other countries, using a network of offshore companies to conceal his activities. Marco gathered as much evidence as possible, documenting every transaction, every meeting, every conversation. He also obtained copies of Visconti's financial records, which proved his involvement in the illegal activities. After several months, Marco had gathered enough evidence to bring Visconti down. He contacted me and arranged to meet at a safe location. He handed me a flash drive containing all of the evidence he had collected. I thanked him for his bravery and his dedication. He had risked his life to help me, and I was deeply grateful. I immediately contacted the journalist who had exposed Visconti's illegal activities in the past. I shared the evidence with her, and she promised to publish a follow-up article that would expose Visconti's even more egregious crimes. A few days later, the newspaper published the article. The article detailed Visconti's money laundering, his tax evasion, and his arms trafficking. It also revealed his plans to expand his operations into other countries. The article caused an even bigger sensation than the first one. The public was outraged by Visconti's actions, and the authorities launched a full-scale investigation into his organization. Visconti was arrested and charged with a long list of crimes. He was facing decades in prison, and his entire empire was on the verge of collapse. I had finally gotten my revenge. I had brought Carlo Visconti to justice, and I had protected my home, my family, my legacy. But as I sat on the porch of my farmhouse, watching the sunset over the Tuscan hills, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. I knew that Visconti's associates were still out there, and they might be seeking revenge for his downfall. I also knew that I had crossed a line, that I had become involved in a world of crime and violence that I never wanted to be a part of. I had achieved my goal, but at what cost? Had I compromised my values, my integrity, my very soul? The questions haunted me, keeping me awake at night. I knew that I had to find a way to move on, to put the past behind me, and to rebuild my life. But how could I possibly do that, when the memory of Visconti's betrayal and my own thirst for revenge still lingered in my mind? And what if, despite all the evidence and the charges, Visconti managed to escape justice? Would I ever truly be safe? Isabella Rossi stood on the porch of her beloved farmhouse in Tuscany, the rolling hills stretching before her like the comforting embrace of an old friend. At 62, she had cultivated a life rich with tradition and history, a life woven intricately with the vineyards and olive groves that had been tended by generations of her family. The golden sunlight poured over the land, and she felt the familiar surge of pride and belonging swell within her. Yet, beneath the surface of this idyllic life, shadows loomed. A storm of emotions brewed within her heart, fueled by the recent treachery of her son Marco's wife, Sophia. The very idea of betrayal pierced her heart like a cold dagger, but determination blossomed in its stead. After exposing Sophia's manipulation and marking her as a foe allied to their family no more, Isabella had settled into a rhythm of resilience and restoration, both of the land and their bond. Just as she thought she had secured peace in her world, troubling doubts began to settle in. Marco was thriving, grateful for his newfound appreciation of their heritage and the land, but Isabella's instincts screamed that trouble was not yet done with them. The lingering sense of unease traced the edges of her mind, whispers of danger swirling within the corners of her thoughts. Murmurs of being watched, of mysterious silhouettes crossing her fields at night, filled her with trepidation. Each quiet gust of wind seemed to carry a message wrapped in fear. And just when she believed that she had triumphed over adversity and buried her previous scars, that old foe, Carlo Visconti, the ruthless land developer, emerged like a specter from her darkest dreams. She had fought long and hard to reclaim her home, to ward off his threats, but with each victory came personal costs that weighed heavily on her spirit. Each day she relived Sophia's betrayal, the shock of being manipulated twisting like a knife in her gut. It was then that the news of Visconti's fall ignited a flicker of something she never expected, a realization to her heart's defeating urgency of vengeance. She found an anger within herself, raw and ignited by the desire to not just protect what was hers, but to ensure Visconti faced consequences for every wounded heart he had orchestrated. But she needed proof, a weapon to rally the community against him, a strategy to uproot the evils he planted into the family tree of her life. Little did she know the repercussions of her quest for justice would weave the fate of everyone in her world into a tangle of uncertainty. One grim evening, wallowing amidst thoughts of her triumph, the sound of a vehicle approaching shattered the tranquility. Isabella's heart raced as she recognized the car, a familiar gleam of black that only belonged to darkness. Surely it couldn't be possible. She had thought him cornered, weakened, unrecoverable. But as her dread tightened its grip at the sight of a shadowy figure stepping from the vehicle, fear clawed at her throat, whispering truths that left no room for denial. The game was far from over. The day Marco returned from America was marked by sunshine and an air of anticipation, but Isabella could not shake the remnants of apprehension left by Visconti's ominous reappearance. Marco entered the house with an exuberance that filled each corner, lifting the heavy atmosphere that seemed to cling to the farmhouse following his departure. His experiences had rekindled a spark in his eyes, one that reminded Isabella of when he was a boy full of dreams and wonder. Yet, just as she embraced him tightly, fate ambushed them both as they sought solace from the looming shadows. Marco had returned with news of a different kind. He had encountered a friend of Sophia who revealed that she was planning to wade back into their lives, her intentions obscured under layers of charm and deceit. The thought rippled through Isabella like an icy torrent. She felt betrayed all over again, but her anger quickly transformed into purpose. If she thinks she can come back after all that has happened, she is sorely mistaken, Isabella declared to Marco, her voice steady and resolved. Together, they prepared for the inevitable storm, each plotting their defenses against the woman who had once nearly shattered their bond. The vineyard became their sanctuary as they fortified it, reinstating barriers, weaving distrust into their memories, and stoking fires of anticipation. But with every effort to fortify their lives, the weight of their past clawed at their resolve. The haunted echoes of betrayal lingered like a ghost, threatening to shroud every joyful moment in a fog of uncertainty. Just as hope flickered through their souls, another letter arrived, this one unmarked. Handwritten and bearing an ominous tone, it warned Isabella of dire consequences should she not relent. The words trembled with malice, igniting her resolve anew. Visconti still lurked in the shadows, possibly with the intent to act out his vengeance through others. Through clenched teeth, Isabella seethed at the audacity of her enemies. She gathered Marco, and together they swore this battle was far more than just a fight to salvage their home. It was to reclaim their identities, to rise as warriors of their own fate. As the days turned into nights, Isabella found herself entrapped in a web of wariness and strategy, all while Marco cultivated strength amidst the chaos. She had lost much but would not falter again. In a moment of defiance, she decided to reach out to the community that once supported her, sharing the depths of the enemy that lurked outside their walls. With courage ignited in their hearts, The villagers rallied to her side. Each echo of support rebuilt the bond that had sheltered their land through decades of labor. The strength corded around her felt like a lifeline of history, something Visconti could never hope to unravel. They fortified the defenses around the vineyard, but shadows continued to stretch long when a single act of defiance would ignite tensions. A tire slashed, a fence vandalized, the whispers of fear creeping into their lives with every sun that set. Each act gained momentum. This newfound war became an emotional battle as Isabella found herself teetering at the precipice of her own humanity. And yet, shadows and embers danced against the backdrop of the farm on a chilly night when an uninvited visitor arrived. The familiar vehicle returned to haunt the farmhouse, and Isabella's heartbeat raced. It was the black sedan. Pressed against the wall, she peered outside to see Carlo Visconti himself step out. The confident stride, body language, and insistent grin carved a path of disaster her heart could hardly interpret. "It's time we finish this, Isabella," he called through the night air, slick with danger. The final confrontation loomed on the horizon, and she needed to decide how far she was willing to go to protect everything she had built. Little did she know that the depths of courage she would have to draw upon would bring consequences entwined with her very destiny. In the eerie glow of the moonlight streaming through the window, Isabella stepped outside, her heart pounding in unison with the heavy tread of danger that lingered. "What do you want, Visconti?" she demanded, mustering all the strength she could in front of the man who had brought her so much suffering. Carlo's lips curled into what felt like a twisted smile, and the air thickened with tension as he leaned against his sleek vehicle. "I've come to discuss terms, to negotiate, if you will." Isabella held her chin high, refusing to show any sign of weakness. "I don't negotiate with thieves," she snapped back, embers of her fury burning brighter than ever as she felt the determination of her forebears echo through her veins. "You threatened my family and damaged my home. You will answer for that." Visconti straightened, an icy fire igniting in his eyes. "Isabella, you have no idea the dangers you are stirring up. I don't play games, I play for keeps. And right now, you're at the bottom of that ladder." His voice dripped with condescension. Unwavering, she dared to step closer. "The more you come here to intimidate me, the more resolve I'll have to fight back. I am not afraid of you, Carlo." The confrontation ignited a fierce resolve in Isabella. Instead of backing down, she leaned into the tension, her heart racing with the fierce desire for justice. "You think you can just walk in and destroy lives because money is in your pocket? You couldn't be more mistaken." A flash of rage crossed his face, but it had scarcely settled before Isabella's next words cut through the air sharp as knife. "I have my community behind me, my family standing strong and my heart tethered to this land like a tree with roots deep. You have nothing." Visconti's eyes narrowed. The victory she could see resting just within reach shifted into the equation as he turned to leave. "You may have won this round, Isabella, but warn your village. When the darkness comes for you, it brings profound consequences." He climbed back into his car, the engine roaring like a beast as he sped off into the night. Isabella stood still, the air crackling with adrenaline and fear as the realization sank in. This was more than a game. The final battle was drawing nearer, and she would need to prepare for the storm that would inevitably come. And so the weight of her defiance left traces of uncertainty as she wrestled with every note of truth within her mind. How could she ensure she was ready when the battle began anew? Isabella and Marco spent the following days fortifying their defenses, both physically and mentally. The community stood behind them, ensuring they would never be alone in their fight against Carlo Visconti. Each villager brought their strength, their stories of resilience woven through the tapestry of their shared history. It was empowering. The laughter and voices encircling the farmhouse added a newfound vibrance, a reunion of the ties that had once held them together. Through long nights and early mornings, they built barricades, shared their fears, and laid out plans, strategizing how they would counter Visconti's inevitable retaliation. Within the depths of Isabella's heart, the embers of revenge continued to burn fiercely, threatening to engulf her spirit if she let it. Angry thoughts veered into shadows, but alongside these hazy regrets emerged the anchor of familial bonds forged out of struggle. She resolved that she wasn't just fighting for her own. She was fighting for Marco, for the spirit of their ancestors, for the roots grounded in the soil of the farmland. Then, on a brisk morning draped in fog, the kiss of dawn suddenly brought forward a gust of unsettling news. Lorenzo arrived, wide-eyed with urgency, his usual calm demeanor clouded by concern. "Isabella, we have a situation," he said, and her heart dropped into her stomach at the tone of his voice. "Visconti has reactivated his push to develop the land near your farmhouse, and he has the local council in his pocket." The words hit her hard, like a blow to the chest, and anger flooded her veins. "We have to stop this," Marco said, determination igniting his voice. "We'll fight him together." But Isabella knew they needed more than passion. They needed a plan not just to counter, but to outmaneuver Visconti entirely, approaching it with cunning rather than brute force. As a murmured silence loomed, Isabella's mind raced, contemplating the right course to take. Then, beneath the layers of anguish, she recalled stories of what was left by her family, tales wrapped in lore that protected their legacy. It was time to channel the wisdom of the past into action. They decided to organize a village meeting to rally support against anyone who dared to encroach upon their land. Under the gaze of her community, she felt the last remnants of uncertainty fade, her confidence blossoming. They convened in the heart of the village, lanterns flickering with warmth, and one by one each villager stepped forward to declare their intention to support one another. Encouraged by their loyalty, Isabella's heart swelled with renewed purpose and strength. Standing at the front of the gathering, she finally spoke her truth. "We are guardians of this land and keepers of its legacy," she called out, passion igniting every word. "We stand united against anyone who believes they can take what rightfully belongs to us. We will rise together and protect our home and our history for generations to come." Cheers erupted from the crowd as Isabella felt a wave of hope surge forcefully through her body. This was only the beginning of the fight against Visconti's darkness, and they would meet the challenge head-on. Little did she know how the final confrontation would turn the tides, awakening an enemy more formidable than the challenges she faced. With their newfound resolve, Isabella, Marco, and the villagers began to plan for the inevitable showdown with Carlo Visconti. They gathered evidence of his dubious dealings, documenting every transaction and shady connection he had manipulated over the years. Each meeting they held became a gathering of souls fueled by tradition, fiercely united in purpose to stand against the encroachments of greed. Isabella reached out to local journalists and environmental activists, knowing that their combined efforts would amplify their voice. Every voice raised against Visconti would underline the truth that echoed throughout the valley. It wasn't merely a battle of land. It was about protecting their heritage, their way of life, and their identity as a community. The days turned into frenetic weeks, with the urgency of the mission propelling them forward. But still, the specter of fear loomed ominously in the back of Isabella's mind, manifesting as restlessness in her heart. Why couldn't they bring Visconti down once and for all? The sound of footsteps echoed as Marco entered their makeshift strategy room. "Mama, I think we are ready," he declared, a fierce determination glinting in his eyes. However, Isabella didn't feel prepared. The weight of everything rested heavily upon her shoulders, unseen threads of uncertainty winding around her like worrying vines. "We must be vigilant, Marco," she reminded him gently. "There is something sinister about Visconti. We need to be ready for any surprises he may launch." He nodded, understanding the gravity of their task ahead. Yet, as they began to solidify their plans, the tension swelled into a palpable fear that lingered beneath every layer of their preparations. Then, on a day heavy with anticipation, Lorenzo approached with news that sent chills down Isabella's spine. "Carlo Visconti is planning to clear the land near your farmhouse," he warned, disbelief perched upon his features. "He's preparing to move forward with development amidst our resistance." Isabella's heart raced as realization struck. If they did not act soon, everything they stood for could crumble beneath the weight of greed. Anxiety twisted in her chest as she hurriedly called for an emergency meeting with the village leaders, desperate to strategize and devise a plan that could outmaneuver Visconti once and for all. They gathered in the warm barn with sunlight streaming through the cracks, shadows dancing like memories swirling around them. Isabella's heart swelled with hope as she rallied the community once more, her words aided by the strength of their commitment together. "Visconti cannot outmatch our love for this land or our resolve to protect it," she proclaimed, voice echoing in the closeness of the gathering. "Let us unite our strength. We are the voices rooted within these hills. The truth shall guide us to victory." And with final fervor, they began crafting their strategy, constructing not just a defense but also a counteroffensive. friends and neighbors moved together towards the development site that represented a breach against everything they cherished. They crafted signs of protest, assembling fences adorned with the imagery of their cherished traditions. With their mission set, Isabella knew it was only a matter of time before the winds of fate would blow the final outcome their way. But within her, the anxious hope of success tinged with the shadows of danger remained. Visconti would inevitably retaliate. It was only a matter of when. The stakes were slowly rising as they gathered strength, but soon it would come to a head. The protests would either be the rallying cry they needed or the catalyst that would ignite Visconti's desperation. Would they be ready when the storm finally descended upon them? As the day of reckoning drew near, the tension in Isabella's household increased, almost palpable as shadows seemed to move against the walls. Each dawn brought with it the sound of preparations, the relentless rhythm of voices lifted in support, the creaking of tools, and the laughter of children weaving in and out of their efforts. The villagers formed a united front, their spirits alight with a shared passion that echoed through every turn of the earth. Isabella felt the weight of hope swell within her heart as they worked tirelessly to prepare for the approaching challenge. Yet lingering edges of apprehension still coiled through her thoughts, reminding her of the consequences that were ever present, hidden beneath the surface like a storm waiting to pounce. For days, they confronted Visconti's unpredictable idiosyncrasies, watching with narrowed gazes as men adorned in dark suits examined the land, measuring intent against their resolve. It was only a matter of time before that storm broke, where reason could no longer burgeon as emotions began to catch flame. On the eve of the protests, Isabella paced the floor of her home, thoughts spinning wildly as moments from the past surfaced before her eyes, reminding her of every scar Visconti had carved upon her spirit. She couldn't let his pursuit take away her hopes again. Not again. As darkness cloaked the land, an air of defiance coiled around her heart as a fierce determination paved the path forward. But it was then that she received a call from Lorenzo, rippling through despair like fragile glass. "Isabella, you need to come quickly. It is about Marco." The breath held in her throat knew only fear. What danger had her son encountered? Her heart raced as she hurried towards him, sensing that the storm swirling was closing in. Would this demise of family's resolve and passion finally prove too great? The moment Isabella reached the farmhouse, a wave of panic washed over her. Marco stood at the front door, his expression twisted with palpable distress. "Mama!" he shouted, voice strained with urgency. "You need to see this." Isabella rushed to him, her heart pounding in her chest. They went inside the farmhouse together, and Marco pointed to a pile of ominous letters spread across the kitchen table. Each envelope bore the mark of Carlo Visconti, the return address mocking their vulnerability with every stroke of ink. "He's threatening us," Marco said, anger boiling just beneath the surface. "He claims that if we move forward with our protests, he will take legal action against the entire village, and that will lead to inevitable repercussions." Isabella felt her breath hitch in her throat as her mind raced with the implications of his words. Visconti was blatantly retaliating, trying to sow seeds of doubt and fear, to fracture the tight-knit community they had built to fight against his greed. "We cannot let him intimidate us, Marco," she said firmly, her resolve reigniting like a flame in her chest. "We must stand together, united, and confront him head-on." Marco's face hardened with determination. "I'm with you, Mama. We fight for what's ours." They gathered the letters, quickly disseminating their contents to their neighbors, igniting discussions to reinforce their unity against the external threats. But the fear began to seep through, weakening the spirits of their community, a somber reminder that the path forward would require sacrifices. The idea of legal battles weighed heavily on their hearts. "This is bigger than we thought," Isabella said, pacing as she formulated a plan. "This is about proving not just to ourselves, but to Visconti that his threats hold no power over us. There remains strength in our unity." Marco nodded. Determination sparkled in his eyes like fine wine shimmering in sunlight. They resolved to confront Visconti on the day of their protest, knowing full well that it could ignite the final confrontation that would determine the future of their homeland. The anticipation swirled, each heartbeat melding into a rhythm that echoed their collective battle cry. But as they prepared for that pivotal day, Visconti had his own machinations spinning in the dark. He would not back down easily. He was gathering his forces, determined to tear apart Isabella's every hope. On the day of the protest, Isabella woke before dawn broke over the horizon, the air thick with anticipation. The villagers began to assemble at the farmhouse, their spirits resolute, ready to stand against Visconti and the aspirations of greed that threatened to engulf their home. The sounds of voices rose in warmth as families came together, laughter twinkling like stars amidst their shared determination. Yet as the sun began its ascent, casting a gentle glow over the fields, an unsettling energy hung in the air, a pot of boiling emotions waiting to erupt. Isabella walked among them, encouraging and fortifying their resolve, while keeping her heart tethered to the quiet nagging voice that warned of impending danger. When the moment finally arrived, the crowd began their march towards the outskirts where Visconti's operation had commenced. Heavy machinery stood poised like menacing giants, competing with nature and threatening the land Isabella cherished. The weight of the community surged through Isabella, wrapping around her shoulders like an empowering mantle. Each step forward ignited the fire of their shared heritage. Their voices rose as a symphony of defiance against the ominous threat looming within Visconti's operations. "We will not be silenced. This land is our home," rang through the hills, carving paths of resolute unity with every footfall. Yet it was at that moment, amidst the swell of determination, Visconti arrived with a contingent of his own, lawyers and supporters who embodied shadows of greed, echoing dissatisfaction and contempt. "What is this nonsense?" he demanded, looking down at them as though they were mere nuisances rather than guardians of their own lives. Isabella felt the anger boiling in her veins, but tempered her spirit, knowing today was about more than personal vendettas. They had to remain united. "It's time to put an end to your blight on this land, Carlo," Isabella called, her voice strengthened by the chorus of villagers who stood behind her, arms extended, hearts ablaze. As Visconti's smirk faded into a scornful glare, the air thickened with the tension of impending collision. "You think you can win this war simply by rallying together? You will lose everything you've worked for," he threatened, his tone dripping with malice. "I will bury you all." The villagers stood firm, refusing to be swayed by the venom in his words. Marco stepped forward, his visage fierce with conviction. "We will not back down, Visconti. You've hurt our community long enough. This is our land, and we'll protect it with everything we have." The crowd rallied behind him, a wave of voices echoing the spirit of their shared history. These fields had witnessed sweat, laughter, tears. And now they would stand together as one against this undead tyrant. But Visconti was cunning. The threat of retaliation brewed in his sly eyes and dripped from his lips like venom. "Consider this your warning, Isabella. You are forcing my hand," he spat before signaling to his lawyers, who began to scribble notes furiously. Just then, the unthinkable transpired. A flurry of police vehicles arrived on the scene, their lights flashing as they cut through the haze of confusion. "We have reports of illegal protests and disruptions," the chief officer declared, stepping from the car. Isabella's heart sank as she realized how Visconti had meticulously planned to use the law against them. "You will stand down or face the consequences." Alarm surged through the crowd as fear began to flutter like fragments of a broken dream. Standing against the weight of authority, the villagers became fragmented, glances traded amongst them. Could they face this threat together? But Isabella knew they had no option but to stand their ground. They could not let fear fracture their unity. She felt the strength of every soul alongside her, their histories entwined like vines clutching the soil of their land. "We will never back down," Isabella shouted, her voice determined as she felt every heartbeat with hers. Marco stood with her, resolute in their shared decision. "We fight for our heritage today. This is our stand." As tensions escalated, Visconti remained in the shadows, lurking like a vulture waiting to swoop down on their weakness. Isabella's heart raced as she led the charge to face the officers, standing before them and demanding respect for their rights, her voice unwavering despite the fear that threatened to engulf her. "This land is ours. We will not let it flourish beneath the feet of greed." Each word echoed the unified strength that surged behind her as she appealed to the officers. Even they could see the truth that set them aflame. "We are the community. We are the land. We stand for all that is in our heritage." Yet doubts surfaced amongst the officers, whispers of apprehension flickering across their faces. The officer in charge hesitated, but then Visconti's lawyers stepped forward to drown Isabella's resonant declaration in scripted calm. "This gathering is illegal. They are obstructing development that will surely be beneficial." The venom dripped from their tones, as if they sought to extinguish every embers of hope roused by the villagers. Isabella could sense the tide shifting dangerously underfoot. Through clenched teeth, she reminded herself that retreat would mean surrender to the darkness they had sought to banish. Just as Visconti's lawyers made headway, one voice broke through the noise like a clarion call. Lorenzo had emerged from the crowd, invigorated by the warrior spirit within him. "We are going to make sure that everyone knows the truth about your operations," he declared, summoning the support of the villagers who rallied alongside their faithful friend, ready to stand their ground, sturdy against the manipulations of greed. A steady grip tightened around Isabella's heart, reaffirming her courage as doubts seed into the fabric of their confrontation. This was it, right at the precipice of catastrophe and victory. All they had endured was frayed, but intact. The essence of heritage surrounded them, painting the reality they needed to fight for their right to exist. Voices cascaded together, rising above the charged atmosphere as the community stood side by side, united against the many threats that sought to rip them apart. The name of Visconti felt like sour bile against their tongues, but the truth they harbored became the spear that would pierce through the darkness while valor flared against the electric air. "We gather not merely as neighbors, but as guardians of the legacy rooted in the sweat of our ancestors," Isabella shouted above the growing chaos. The villagers echoed her call, lifting their voices as one. "Together we stand, and never shall we fall." With conviction bolstered, they faced Visconti and his lawyers, determined not to falter before their relentless persistence. Just then, the first threads of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the scene in a warm embrace. The officers, losing their resolve against the resilience of the villagers, exchanged looks of uncertainty. Would they arrest a community fighting for its very soul? Yet Visconti's malicious gaze never wavered from Isabella. He would not yield quietly. She felt the wick of danger burning inside him. In one swift motion, the atmosphere boiled over. "You think you've won, Isabella?" he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "This is merely the beginning. I will destroy everything you hold dear." But Isabella refused to back down. "You cannot take what does not belong to you. Your greed will shatter, and we will rise like a phoenix from the ashes." The intensity hung in the air, a palpable tension that seemed to pulse with uncertainty, a potent promise of confrontation that could forever change their lives. But it was then, under the burning sun, that Visconti made his pivotal move. With a swift signal, the officers moved forward in an attempt to disperse the crowd, shoving villagers to clear a path. Isabella felt her heart race as fear threatened to weave through the unity they had just forged. Within the storm of chaos, Marco surged forward to defend her. "Protect our home," he shouted, echoing every fiber of their ancestral roots as villagers rallied behind him, standing resolute to shield what so many had fought to preserve. In that moment of resolve, the crowd surged forward as emotions erupted, fueled by the realization of everything they stood to lose. The confrontation surged through every ounce of their will, stands of unity igniting the fervent flame driving their ambitions forward. "You may try to trample our rights, Visconti, but we will never submit to your tyranny," Isabella yelled, and that sentiment stayed etched into the memory of everyone present, the fire within them igniting the resilience needed to push back against every unjust turn of fate they still faced. Marco reached for his mother, his eyes fierce with pride. The bond between them was unbreakable. "Together," he said, "we will face any threat." But as they huddled together, the visual of courage shining so brightly, it would reach Visconti too. Just as he calculated the best way to execute the final strike against everything Isabella had worked tirelessly to defend. Isabella clung to every moment that both the legal and emotional pendulum had swung in favor of their battle, but it was gone in an instant. Visconti, ever the serpent, bared his fangs as he pulled the weight of his manipulation closer, readying to lash out one final time. Within the chaos, he receded, his men unconsciously retreating with him. It felt like a thin mirage of victory flickering just beyond their grasp. The demands of their community brought forth a moment of clarity, until the world morphed, and without any word, Visconti was gone, slithering back into the shadows like the predator he was. Isabella's heart sank as he could easily return with force, and the weight of fear washed over her like ice water. "Mama, we will stand guard." "We know his traps. He will not win," Marco reassured, though uncertainty laced his words. It felt like a fragile promise, teetering on the brink of the indefinable. We need to unify with even greater strength. If we retreat, we lose the battle. And yet moments later, as the villagers began to disperse to their homes, Isabella's heart twisted inside her chest as she watched them leave. Was their strength fragile? As they returned home, thoughts coiled inwards, reanimating an urgency that tightened with impending treachery, a looming question of whether they had truly won this round. In the days that followed, uncertainty wrapped itself around the village like a dense fog. With every tick of the clock, the tension mounted. While the memory of the confrontation still echoed in their ears, whispers of doubt crept like invasive weeds amongst their hearts. Isabella's resolve remained unwavering. She took solace amidst her daily routines, cultivating the land that united them all, yet her mind raced. Is Carlo Visconti truly finished with them, or merely waiting for the opportune moment to strike? Her disbelief in him vanished slowly but surely, etched into the very marrow as she turned every stone of her life upside down to prepare for the worst. The rise of adrenaline cried out, urging her to stay vigilant, knowing Visconti's hunger for power could never be satiated. But a dark cloud lingered, whispering doubts that threatened to overshadow the growth she had felt in the aftermath of the battle. As Isabella pored over her responsibilities, she received unexpected news one crisp autumn morning. The council meeting was set. This would be their chance to speak against Visconti's plans officially. The anticipation updated their battle plans, forcing Isabella to take action. "We'll need all the evidence we have," Marco shouted, determination sparking in his voice. Together, they gathered villagers, combing through every scrap of information they could find on Visconti, unearthing financial records and correspondence that could expose his true motives. With each page turned, the shadows from before lifted. Renewed hope dangled just within reach. As she researched, Isabella stumbled upon undeniable proof of Visconti's community-damaging ambitions. Each revelation became a stepping stone toward their formidable strategy to maintain authority over their land. Lurking within her heart remained the burden of responsibility for uniting their voices, and as they shared evenings working side by side, laughter echoed amidst the bittersweet tension brewing beneath the surface, each moment wrapping her canvas of hope, but fears still lingered. Then came the meeting, a high-stakes confrontation that would spell everything for their community. Gathered within the town hall, locals filled the room with fervent heartbeats bound by the truth they all strove to protect. As the town leaders sat, Isabella stood before them. The weight of heartbreak subsided while determination sparked life within her chest. "We stand united," she proclaimed, her voice ringing clear. "The land we protect is our heritage, our history. Visconti thrives on deceit, and the time has come for his reign to end." Marco stood adjacent to her, a steadfast figure ready at her side. Each word was an electric charge through the air, drawing all eyes to their cause. "We have evidence of Visconti's dealings," he asserted, presenting the gathering of documents. "This is our last chance. We cannot allow his poison to seep into our village any longer." Isabella beamed with pride, but the officers on the council exchanged furtive glances, doubt tugging at the corners of their strength. The truth remained unwieldy. Visconti's specter had suffocated local governance, cloaking their intentions beneath the veil of reason. Yet determined not to falter, Isabella pressed forward, pouring out the stories of the village. Heartfelt tales of resilience, portraying the necessity of preserving their land, wrapped around the gathered crowd, capturing the essence of their shared lives. With each spoken memory, imaginations ignited among the people, wrapping the gathering in hope. Ignited by their shared experiences and loyalty, one after another spoke against Visconti, confronting years of anguish born from his greed. They delivered heartfelt testimonies, illustrating the vital connection they held with the land, propelling their truth forward. The heartbeat of their community thrummed within every ardent word, echoing of togetherness against darkness. Yet the council leaders hesitated, restrained by power struggles woven with fear, drawing shadows upon their judgment. "This is a delicate matter, and without evidence, we cannot act bravely." Isabella felt the pit grow deep inside her as they clung to cowardice. Then, without warning, the air shifted. A familiar presence entered, a striking silhouette emerging from the doorway, Carlo Visconti himself. His eyes glinted with malevolence as he lingered near the entrance before surveying the crowd, his confidence glimmering with bravado. "I wouldn't be so hasty, Isabella," he declared, the room freezing as his voice reverberated through the gathered group. You seek to destroy me, but you fail to see that this development is essential for the growth of your precious little village." Shock rippled through the crowd as Visconti approached Isabella, eyes locked. His presence demanded attention as he toyed with the strings of fear afloat. Isabella met his challenge head-on, refusal locked into her spirit. "This is about community, Carlo, not greed," she cried out, but fear trickled anew. With every word exchanged, the tension escalated, woven from truth and manipulation, crippling the resolve that surrounded her. And just as Isabella felt the weight of despair begin to settle into her heart, victory erupted from the simmering vault of hope. Lorenzo stepped forward from the crowd, his confidence ablaze as he addressed Visconti with unwavering determination. "The villagers will not be silenced. We stand against you as one united front against your greed." His words ignited a wave of cheers that filled the hall, triumph beginning to bloom beneath every heartfelt proclamation. Visconti's expression twisted as rage surged through him. "You will all suffer for this," he snarled, but Isabella felt the energy shift, every heart beat with unity against the dark. "Together we thrive, apart we fall," Marco called out, the mantra echoing. A whirlwind of emotions arose in that stormy room as Visconti stormed toward the exit. But just as he stepped out into the light, a blinding brilliance illuminated from behind him. Law enforcement had arrived, armed with the evidence Isabella rallied them with. They had actually come to arrest Visconti for his trafficking activities and misuse of power among local governance. The air crackled with disbelief as soon as the officers recognized the fearlessness of the villagers, who stood together solid in their will against tyranny. The sound of handcuffs clicked. Visconti's dangerous reign was finally over as he was led away, faces of innocence rejoicing from the sidelines. As the minutes passed, Isabella felt her heart swell beyond belief. Mason jars of tears were released, evaporating on the scales of fear, replaced by laughter and joy as they echoed throughout the town hall. The celebration that unfolded amongst them was a tapestry of liberation. They fought back against the shadows, surged beyond the threats, and emerged victorious once again, united in their truth. For within the battle lay the threads of connection, an inheritance far beyond earthly possessions could ever measure. They had taken on the darkness surrounding them and emerged stronger. They were the guardians, the spirited defenders of their land, woven into every thread of hope. With the sun sitting high above the Tuscan hills, as laughter bubbled and song floated through the air, Isabella realized the path ahead, while paved with toil, held nothing but joy. Peace returned to the farmhouse, and as Marco stepped out onto the porch, he turned to Isabella, his eyes gleaming with gratitude. "We did it, Mama," he said with awe, a smile splitting his face wide. Isabella smiled back, exhaustion lining her features, but her heart raced brightly with newfound hope. Together, they had faced the tempest, and yet emerged with the spirit of their family's legacy, to love the land they cherished and protect the bonds formed along the way. The sun cast brilliant rays, illuminating each corner of the farmhouse, and Isabella felt the warmth enveloping her as laughter filled the air. That was their heritage, a fierce love that knew no bounds, a promise reaffirmed amongst the tapestry of their lives, a refrain against any future trials. If history taught them anything, it was that the strength of family and community would persist, unyielding indeed. And as the sky darkened slowly into dusk, Isabella felt the power within her settle at the horizon of belonging, knowing she had overcome not just Visconti's wrath, but also the darker recesses of her own heart to embrace peace. A new chapter awaited, one that she would write with every moment grounded in love and bonds that could never shatter. Yet almost as a whisper of fate, a tremor surged within, a question of whether shadows would arise once again, what true battles lay around the bend, enveloped in the darkness of secrecy and intrigue.